Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, one and all, to the newest episode of the Blitz Network Radio. We're recording this on Monday, January 21st. You're going to listen to it on Tuesday, January 22nd. And Rob, the Patriots did it again.
Do we have to talk about it, Adam? Do we have to?
I mean, we have to talk about it. Obviously, there's a lot to come out of it. A little bit of shrouded in controversy. I am ashamed to say I told you so. It was too perfect of a storm for everything to go in favor. Everything just looked to be such in favor of the Chiefs, like I said last week. And then it just felt like too perfect of a storm. And of course it was. It was just too good of a situation for the Chiefs to really cash in.
You were correct ultimately, but I do want to add the caveat that my main argument for the Chiefs winning was that Pat Mahomes is the ultimate cheat code quarterback, and he absolutely lived up to that. And if not for, that's obviously football. If not for some bad bounces, whatever else, we're discussing his Super Bowl berth. We're discussing the coming of football's next God tier quarterback. He is still a God tier quarterback, and Sunday only affirmed that further. So I just wanted, I just wanted to reiterate that. But yes, you are ultimately right. The Patriots did the Patriots thing. Everything went in their way, blah, blah, blah. I hate football.
Well, we don't hate football. We just hate the Patriots. Which
yes.
Absolutely agreement there. But I'm glad you talk about Pat Mahomes, because a good bit of the controversy coming out of this game, if you want to call it controversy, was the fact that Patrick Mahomes did not get to touch the ball in overtime. Obviously, the Patriots won the coin toss, go down and score a touchdown right away, which revised overtime NFL rules from a few years ago. That's the only way to have it be sudden death. So we're going to take a little bit of an overreaction Monday spin on this. Rob, is it an overreaction based on this Chiefs game to say that the NFL needs to revise their overtime rules?
Based on this game alone, yes. And I saw you tweeting about it earlier today. Based on this game a lot, I do agree that people want to shift it, or at least some people anyway, want to shift it because the Patriots benefited. But this has been something that has gone back ever since the NFL shifted the overtime rules a few seasons back from sudden death. I mean, this happened to Aaron Rodgers in 2014, 2015, when in that classic game against the Cardinals, I believe when Larry Fitzgerald broke a few tackles in overtime and they scored in their first possession, he didn't get the ball after an incredible Hail Mary at the end of regulation. The following year, the Packers went to the NFC Championship against the Seahawks, also didn't get to touch the ball in overtime after an epic collapse. Rodgers didn't, I believe he won MVP that year, unless I'm mistaken. Also didn't get to touch the ball there. And then in Super Bowl 51, between the Falcons and Patriots, Matt Ryan and the Falcons didn't get to touch the ball in the overtime, and Patriots drove straight down. So it's an overreaction in the sense, just based off of this one game, just based off, Patriots hate, why didn't Pat Mahomes, who's incredible, get to touch the ball and get the chance? It's an overreaction that way. I don't think it's an overreaction overall. I think overtime rules do need to be changed, actually.
Yeah, you basically took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to say it's absolutely an overreaction to just base it off of the game, like you said. And I did tweet it earlier. I 100% think that if the Chiefs had won that coin toss and taken the ball down and scored, the only people that would have been mad about that result are the people who were supporting the Patriots in that game. And we basically would be pointing and laughing at them and telling them not to be upset because of the fact of how all the run that they had. I think, as a Blackhawks fan, we kind of experienced that a little bit, where the Blackhawks suck now and people are like, oh, you had such a good run, you should just live with it. So we would have done the same thing to the Patriots. You know what I mean? You had such a good run, get over that overtime thing. But you are right. It's something that needs to be changed. The only thing is, I don't like the college system, so I don't really know how they're supposed to redo the overtime rules, because if you go back and forth, like let's just say the Chiefs get the ball back and go score a touchdown, like is the rule then just that the Patriot, like the next touchdown wins? Because if the Patriots get the ball and score, you're in the same boat. It's still one team getting more chances than the other team.
There's no completely foolproof way to fix it. So because in that advantage, actually, the team that gets the ball second has they have the advantage. There are proven statistical models that the team that would receive the ball second, so especially in college, like in college overtime, it's 62%. They have a 62% chance of winning because they know the outcome. They can work their offense a little bit more. They can do. I'd imagine a lot of that would transfer over to the professional level.
Yeah, in college ranking, I mean, in college football, when it's overtime, you want to be on defense first, so you know what you need to do on offense.
I think it'd be a little different in the NFL because, I mean, you probably have to drive the length of the field, 25, 70 yards as opposed to starting immediately on the outside of the red zone. And I think on its face, there's nothing wrong with guaranteeing a possession. I remember even tweeting back in October when the Bears played that wild overtime game against the Dolphins, where I had the overtime rules wrong. I assumed both teams were guaranteed a possession. I just feel like that should be the standard. I just feel like your quarterback should have a chance to answer no matter what happens. You know what I mean? Maybe that's not something that people want to reconcile with. Maybe there's like the purists. Oh, the defense isn't valued anymore in the NFL. Defense is valued in the NFL. You don't have to lump that in. You don't have to. This is about pushing towards the NFL being more offensively centered. That's not the argument. If anything, it's just trying to make the game better. That's trying to make the game more competitive. It's just trying to make the game more fair. Using arguments like Drew Brees throwing a pick when the Saints got the ball yesterday. I mean, that's a rare thing, So defense is still valued. It's just about making the game more balanced, which should be something that everyone pushes for.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. I think so. Obviously, the college system, which I already said I don't like, but that's pretty much the most fair system for an overtime in football, just because of the nature of football. There's it's not like basketball or hockey where it's basically a free for all in terms of what the possession is at any given moment. You know what I mean? You can't it doesn't flow like that. In baseball, you have a top and a bottom of an inning, so there's an easy solution there. But football, because of the nature of it, because of how much different it is with the offense, defense, possession wise system, it's such a different animal. So college system's the only really fair system to, quote unquote, but I don't want to see that, at least not identically equipped into the NFL. Maybe if you make him go 60 yards or at least start with a kickoff both times. But yeah, like you said, it would make much more sense for it basically to just be both teams going back and forth. The problem is then the clock, in the playoffs, I guess that is kind of how it is if no one scores. But I don't know if I want to it'd be exciting, but I don't want to watch a game add 4 hours or even just add an extra hour because of an overtime, because of teams going back and forth like that.
Well, you don't have to go back and forth. So you guarantee a possession. And if it's still tied after both possessions, its next score wins.
Right. But then I guess, but my point is you're still kind of in the same boat at that point, because if it's first score wins, right, and people are mad that Pat Mahomes didn't get the football, like I said, if Mahomes gets the football and goes and scores a touchdown, they tie the game up. I mean, maybe they go for 2 and win and take the win. But if the Patriots get the ball back and go and score, Tom Brady still got the ball twice and Pat Mahomes got the ball once. So why? What would make that situation that much different?
Well, at that point, then the defense should get a stop, right? And at that point, at least both sides, primary sides of the ball, had a chance to have their impact on the game. I feel maybe that's going a little too meta, but for me, in probably the best AFC Championship game since 2006, I say that without hyperbole. A guy who threw 50 touchdowns, only the third ever to throw 50 touchdowns in a regular season, should have had an opportunity to answer. When Tom Brady went down with 2 minutes to go and a few timeouts and gave the lead to the Patriots, Mahomes had a shot to answer. He should have had another shot to answer for here, and it's that simple. After that, you let the gods decide. In the words of Tyrion Lannister from Game of Thrones.
Yeah,
you let the gods decide. I mean, I think after that, you just throw it up in the air. Anyone who would argue after the fact, after both teams had a possession and it's tied for 2 touchdowns, would just be arguing to get angry. they just be because they can never be satisfied. They don't enjoy anything, and I say that as bluntly as possible.
Right, and obviously, like you said, the defense should have gotten a stop. Obviously, in this case, Chiefs giving up three first downs on 3rd and 10s, which is pretty inexcusable, and also kind of drawing back onto the Chiefs defense. If D Ford hadn't lined up in the neutral zone offsides in the 4th quarter on the play that resulted in interception, we wouldn't even be having the conversation about overtime. So it's not as if the Chiefs got completely screwed, because they did kind of undo themselves in some ways, but obviously it kind of invites the conversation about overtime.
Yeah, and they had their opportunities, and I just want to stress again, balancing this in a way is not a devaluation of defense. Defense is absolutely still valuable. If anything, the Chiefs, their Achilles heel, came back to bite them, the fact that they couldn't play defense. Defense is maybe you don't need an elite defense, but you do need a situationally aware defense, like the Patriots have, for example, that are able to make key plays in key moments, get a sack of Mahomes or something, or get some kind of turnover or what have you. Just make the game balanced. I don't. This doesn't need any more attention than it already has. Just make the game balanced and let's move on. Let's not go back to sudden death. I saw some absolute purists going back. Let's not have a coin toss decided where you only have to go 30 yards for a field goal. Let's not do that. Let's just guarantee both teams possession and let's move on.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's switch gears a little bit to the NFC Championship game, which also was not without controversy, I should say. So obviously the Rams winning that one in overtime as well on a field goal in that circumstance, finishing off by a score of 26-23. But there, of course, was the controversy I mentioned with the pass interference that was not called on Nikel Robey-Coleman in the 4th quarter. The game was tied at the time. Rob, so the Saints end up kicking that field goal. The Rams kick a field goal. We go to overtime, and then there's a turnover, like you mentioned earlier, with Drew Brees throwing the interception, and the Rams end up winning. You can make the argument that with all of that happening, or had the pass interference been called, the Saints get a first down, potentially score a touchdown. We never are in that position. So, Overreaction Monday. Does the NFL need to make pass interference a reviewable play?
No. And I thought about this a lot, but I feel as if opening up a play that is already – now, the Nikel Robey-Coleman play is not subjective. That is very obvious pass interference. But when you make all pass interference reviewable, you open up a Pandora's box, Adam. That is one of the most subjective plays in football. Almost all aspects of football itself is subjective. There are so many plays where players get away with holding, players get away with an offsides, players get away with a false start, what have you. And it's almost always pointed out conveniently because it's in the age of social media and Twitter where, oh man, this crucial game winner, so-and-so was offside, so-and-so was actually holding, what were the refs doing? When you open that kind of play up to review, you open yourself up to adding 30 to 45 minutes of game time. You open yourself up to, completely already ruining what is a product that does not need that much altering. I found myself, for example, in the Patriots and Chiefs. Well, I know we're discussing the pass interference in the Saints game, but I found myself watching the Patriots and Chiefs game in the 4th quarter. There must have been 3 or 4 separate reviews of plays. There was more drama on those reviews of calls that are incredibly subjective because none of those officials know what a catch is. None of those officials know inherently what the rules are that they're supposed to enforce. And it must have added at least 20 or 30 minutes to the game just based off of the feel of it. It was more drama involved in the Zebras trying to officiate the game that they have no absolute consequence of trying to do it properly. And you do that now where you allow them to review a play that maybe you could probably honestly call pass interference on a lot of pass plays that it doesn't happen on already. And in my opinion, you make the product worse.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat with you. I think that the Adam Hogue of WGN Sports tweeted it, and he said basically if you were to make pass interference a reviewable play, you're looking at the catch no catch rule over and over and over again within a game. like within one game. Like I would say within any one NFL game, you probably see the catch no catch rule come into effect 2 or 3 times. You would see pass interference come up like at least 5 or 6 times, if not more, per game. So you're looking at doubling that, and it would just be much more controversial. And like you said, pass interference is 100% subjective. There are times when it feels blatant to just about everybody on earth, like the Robey-Coleman play. And then there are times where, like J.C. Jackson yesterday got called for a pass interference that it probably was interference, but watching it live, it almost was hard to tell. You get to see it on replay, and I think this was in the fourth quarter. He kind of held up Tyreek Hill a little bit, but watching it live, I could not tell, and I was a little surprised they even threw the flag. So it is such a subjective call that sometimes what seems obvious does not get called, and what doesn't look like interference at all does get called. And so it's such a subjective thing. If you're going to make it reviewable, you're going to add, like you said, you're going to add so much play time to the game. And also, I think, one thing that we've seen happen in the NFL, maybe to a little bit lesser extent, but with scoring plays becoming reviewable and all turnover plays becoming reviewable, you sometimes see refs err on the side of ruling a play an interception, ruling a play a fumble recovery, ruling a play a touchdown, just because they know that there's very little risk in making that call, because it's going to go to review and their call is going to be corrected if they're clearly wrong. But the problem is, if there's no clear evidence, you just go to the call on the field, which might not have been correct, and the official might have just kind of been playing the cover your ass game. So I don't know how obviously that might end up coming into effect here, where if you just go every pass interference call is going to be reviewed, they're going to start throwing the laundry on every play.
People complain about the refs, and people so much, and how much worse it's gotten supposedly. And it's only gotten worse because the NFL decided to muddle with things that should be more reviewed. With the NFL let the officials become the story by getting more involved in what is incredibly subjective, like the catch rule, for example. You do that more, you're making people that aren't playing, that aren't putting pads on, that aren't coaching, you're giving them control of the game. You're making them the story. And then at that point, what are we even doing? Like, I get the fervor over absolutely making sure to get a call right, but there is such a thing as game flow. There is such a thing as making sure the players and the coaches are the story. I think the way it's legislated now, and if it continues to be even more altered, like with pass interference, you're already seeing officials afraid of not influencing the game so much that they end up influencing the game anyway. You do that with pass interference, that problem will only get worse. It's that simple.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like we've been saying, pass interference is such a subjective thing, and if you want to make any pass interference reform, just don't make it a spot foul anymore. 10, 15 yards at most, and move on. But the spot foul, that's kind of a different discussion from what we're having here, obviously, but that's the only pass interference reform that I think makes any sense.
Does New York's replay center, they're continually watching the game, correct? Like NFL headquarters, like they have every game on, and they have people watching there, correct?
I haven't been there, but I have to assume that's correct.
I feel like the perfect solution to all of this is they almost have like an official assigned to that game that's watching the game from the viewer's perspective, from these calls that are so obvious to people, the people sitting at home and the people on the sidelines and whatever, that can see it on the Jumbotron, because that's an issue here where it's not communicated to these guys making snap judgment calls on incredibly athletic, incredibly freakishly talented players. They're not getting they're not necessarily getting the same viewpoints that we do. They're not getting that HD TV. They're not getting that. They're not getting that same exact experience. If anything, I would assign a guy to each game, every single game. You have the resources. You're a $1 billion industry, and you just leave it up again. But it's subjective, so it's never perfect. You leave it up to his call to, oh, hey, let's actually review that. Oh, hey, like that was a bad call on something that was incredibly blatant.
Yeah,
and that point, leave it be.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I think, I think to the NHL replay system where their version of New York is Toronto. That's where the league offices are. And anytime there's a review, ultimately the final call is like on the review is made by the referees on the ice. But when they make those reviews, they put a headset on and they are communicating and watching the play with the NFL official or NHL official, I should say, in Toronto and communicating with him on what all sides are seeing on the play. So again, like I said, the ultimate judgment does come down to the officials on the ice, but they have that person in their ear. And in the playoffs, I do think that Toronto ends up making the final decisions. So I think at the very least, and I know obviously you see the officials having conversations, but you know they're communicating with someone either in the booth or in New York, but there absolutely should be an NFL official, like you said, who's supposed to just watch it. And overall, I mean, I think if you making things reviewable is not on a whole a bad thing. Pass interference is a subjective thing, but you want to get calls correct. But calls need to also reviews need to not take a long time, because then you look at a situation like the quote unquote muffed punt yesterday in Kansas City, where the review went on for so long that to me, if a review goes for too long, there's no way it can be clear and obvious, and you overturn it, and then they ended up doing that anyway. So you know, there's so much that needs to be changed with the review system to begin with that adding a wrinkle like into a subjective play like pass interference is just it'd be such a huge reach.
Well, that's my point in having the guy watch. You know, if anything, that would completely alter the instant replay system. You had like you mentioned with the NHL in Toronto, you have someone continually watching, and that doesn't interrupt game flow. You're making sure there's an emphasis on getting the call right, and you're making sure there's an emphasis on not completely slowing the game down and not letting the officials become the story. You're getting the best of both worlds. This being the NFL, I'm confident that they will not think of this and only make the issue even more complicated.
Absolutely. And it's important to remember too, like I said, the Rams or the Saints may have ended up winning the game, if they had gotten that call. But it's similar to the Bears Cody Park situation, where it's not that play lost them the game. It's just that play did not win them the game. You know, like they had so many opportunities after that. They still took the lead. They then allowed the Rams back into the game, then got into overtime, turned the football over, and allowed the Rams to score a field goal. So it's not as if that play cost them the game, like a lot of people are making it out to be, but obviously it did play a role. So it's a conversation worth having.
I mean, Drew Brees probably played the worst playoff game of his career, let's be honest. And like the Saints as a whole were the NFC's best team for the entire season and did not look like it for most of that game. So it's easy to put the scapegoat on one of the worst calls in NFL history, but the Saints we had this discussion with the Bears. The Saints only have themselves to blame for letting it get to that point. If you look at the tail of the tape, they should have been winning that game by multiple scores. I mean, the first two possessions, they settled for field goals, especially after Demario Davis intercepted Jared Goff and they're in the red zone. How do you settle for a field goal like that when you're playing your Superdome? You were letting the Rams hang around.
Well, here's what was even weirder to me, and not to cut you off, but they settled for field goals on those first two, and they were in the red zone on fourth downs and settled for field goals. And then on their third drive, in the red zone on fourth down, they go for it. Like, why? Where's the mentality switch all of a sudden? You know what I mean? Like, why didn't you try that earlier? It just, especially after the interception, if you end up converting and getting a touchdown in that situation, what a huge swing of momentum that would have been. It's just a crazy situation, and I didn't understand the line of thinking to take two field goals and then go for it.
I mean, if you go for it and don't make it, you put Jared Goff on the 1 yard line. And you, like me, is obviously, I know you don't have the same highest opinion of him, just like I don't. And you're putting him on the 1 yard line in the Superdome, where it was as loud as Jurassic Park, where the T-Rex is coming and you can see the water moving. Like, that was the reports of how loud it was there. And you have a guy that needs Sean McVay to relay all the communication, all the play calls of the Rams offense into him. You're telling me as the Saints you don't take that? Sean Payton, this is supposed to be this aggressive, gunslinging head coach, and he threw this whole emotional tirade about getting screwed over by the officials. He screwed himself over too. And no one's going to tell him that, but That's the only way the Saints are ever going to reconcile with this.
Yeah, and just as a last little point on this, I will say, kind of adding on to what you just said, I think watching Jared Goff struggle under pressure, obviously he found a little bit of a rhythm in that game, ended up, I think he threw 1 touchdown, 1 pick, etc. But watching him struggle against the pressure the Saints were bringing to kind of tie this into the Bears, I think it made it so much easier to really appreciate the growth you saw from Mitchell Trubisky on that, in that aspect of football. Just his response to pressure this year, it was clear, especially when you should look at how he handled that fourth quarter against the Eagles. But not to change the subject too much, because we still have one more thing to talk about with this weekend. Rob, was this the best championship Sunday of all time?
No, I actually thought the Saints-Rams game was kind of dull.
Really? I mean, I liked it. I thought it was one of the best because both games were so close. Like, it feels like so often, like, as weird as this is to say, sometimes the championship Sunday games one of them ends up being a blowout or just not that close. So for both games to go to overtime for the first time ever was such like a fun thing. Obviously, like you said, the Saints-Rams game wasn't the best, but I was still on the edge of my seat watching that game as it was in the fourth quarter, and same thing happened in the AFC game.
Yeah, but that's the argument of, close automatically means good, and close doesn't automatically mean good. Controversy doesn't automatically mean good. I didn't find myself seeing Saints-Rams as, like, that was supposed to be the two best teams in the NFC. That was, two 13-win teams supposed to be duking it out, an absolute classic, and it was kind of a dud relative to expectations. Maybe I hyped myself up too much according to that, but there were a lot of stoppages in play. There was a lot of sloppy overall play. And then I found myself watching the AFC Championship game, and I think the Chiefs and Patriots put on an absolute, aside from that occasional game flow in the fourth quarter with all those reviews, they put on an absolute masterclass of what the NFL product is at its best. You have the two best quarterbacks in football duking it out. Pat Mahomes is the best quarterback. Let's not confuse that. And you have maybe the greatest quarterback to ever play in Brady, and it absolutely lived up to all the hype. And it was dramatic, and it was back and forth, especially in the second half. I understand the first half, the first half maybe wasn't the greatest, with the Patriots looking like they took control, and then Mahomes ripped that all to shreds. The Chiefs ripped that all to shreds. That was the best AFC Championship game I've watched probably since the 2006 Colts beat the Patriots in the AFC Championship game, where they came back from, I believe, 18 down, and they slayed their demons. Like, it was just a complete jump from what Saints and Rams was.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's hard for me to say
I've
only watched so much, but yeah, I mean, like, I think it was one of the most fun in a long time, at the very least.
I'm looking at the history. So I've only watched football myself since 2006, so I can't really speak to it just like you. But other classic AFC Championship game or other classic championship weekends. Let me look at AFC Championship history. Like, I think this is probably also would have been a fitting overreaction weekend type thing after seeing it. I mean, because, like, I know it was the first time both games went into overtime, but that does not automatically mean it's the best ever. Like, there could have been games in the past where a game didn't go to overtime, but it ended in classic fashion regulation. You know what I mean? Like, that's
never forget the you mentioned 2006. Remember the I don't know if it was the 2006 AFC Championship game, but it was the 2005 season, the Colts Steelers AFC Championship game, where it was one of the most ridiculous endings of all time, where you had the Colts player intercept the football, get run down by Big Ben because he had been stabbed by his girlfriend in the leg earlier that week and still played in the game. And then Mike Vanderjagt, who at the time was the most accurate kicker in NFL history, misses a field goal by a whole extra length of a goalpost. That was one of the craziest finishes in championship weekend. So that kind of serves to your point.
I got it. So in the time I've watched football, so 12 years, the best championship weekend I've watched, and I remember it now that I can reference. 2011, when the last time, actually, ironically, both the road teams also won. So the Rams and Patriots were both the road teams this past Sunday. So 2011, The Giants went into Candlestick Park when Candlestick Park was still thin and upset Jim Harbaugh's 49ers 20-17. And I think Lawrence Tynes was the kicker, and he missed several kicks and eventually redeemed himself. That was the that was the original Advent season of Victor Cruz. And then in the AFC, the Ravens and Patriots duked it out, and that was where Chuck Pagano was ironically the defensive coordinator of the Ravens, and Billy Cundiff missed, I think, like a 40-yarder at the end of regulation that would have sent that game to overtime. The Patriots ended up winning 23-20. Both of those games went right down to it, and I think in my time, from a complete perspective, not necessarily the two best games, but just AFC and NFC, that made it the best I've ever watched.
And I would just like to congratulate us on last week both picking the game the same way, Saints Chiefs, the Super Bowl, I guess, and we both got it wrong.
Don't remind me.
Go us. All right, let's move on to Bears news. The big news of the day, Mitchell Trubisky making the Pro Bowl, asterisk, as a replacement for Jared Goff, who's playing in the Super Bowl. Trubisky joins five other Bears that got the honor, but he will be one of only 5 playing. There's 6 that got the honor, but Khalil Mack sitting out due to injury. But Akeem Hicks, Tariq Cohen, Eddie Jackson, and Kyle Fuller all joining Mitch Trubisky there. Plus another Bears connection, Brian Urlacher serving as the NFC captain. So this is, I guess, the Overreaction Monday. Rob, is this enough to get you to watch the Pro Bowl? Well,
I'll probably have to watch for work at WGN, honestly. So, but if I wasn't working, I probably would also watch because there's nothing going to be else on Sunday, Adam. So yes.
So obviously those are kind of different reasons to watch. So I guess my question is Mitch Trubisky and the Bears' presence there reason for you to watch the Pro Bowl?
For me to be intrigued enough?
Yeah. Like, are you going to watch it? I shouldn't say with bated breath. Like, obviously I'm not going to watch it. And if Mitch Trubisky throws 5 picks, I'm not going to be like, oh wow, this guy sucks.
He's not going to throw 5 picks in a Pro Bowl.
Right. Of course. But you get my point. But if he were to, like, is it enough to, the Bears, obviously Akeem Hicks getting his first nod, like Urlacher, obviously kind of, I wouldn't say redeeming necessarily, but the way that he ended with the Bears wasn't necessarily ceremonious. So kind of it's good to see him get more involved with the team this year. Speaking at the Hall of Fame game with them, and then rubbing up the crowd before their playoff game against the Eagles, and now going to kind of be at the Pro Bowl with 5 Bears. Obviously, the face of the franchise in Trubisky, some of the best, but some of their biggest stars. So I guess, again, as a Bears fan with all this Bears presence, are you going to watch it to watch the Bears, or are you just going to watch it because there's nothing else on?
The latter. I think there's a drummed up narrative. I don't think it's really that intriguing. I'm sure it's really cool for the players. I'm sure it's really cool and meaningful for a lot of people, and I can see why it would be, but it's still the freaking Pro Bowl, man. Like, it's an all-star game. There's not much intensity involved there. There's absolutely no value to me gained from watching from I guess watching it, because there's not really, it doesn't matter who wins or loses. Like, I don't know. Like, it's the skills competition that's going to happen beforehand will be more interesting than the Pro Bowl itself.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat with you, where the Pro Bowl is not the most exciting thing, and I don't need to watch it. But I think it's been so long since the Bears have had Pro Bowlers that, because they have such a presence there, and because like it's some of their biggest stars, obviously Mac not playing in it, but it's some of their biggest names, that it does make me, I guess, more, it gives me more, if I can say, like, quasi excitement. Now I'm not like actually excited to watch the Pro Bowl, but it gives me more reason to watch, and like at least have a sense of like, okay, it'd be cool to watch the Bears do well in this game, the Bears players that are in it. You know what I mean? Like the NHL All-Star game is on Sunday as well. If Patrick King's in that, I'm gonna watch. If he does well, that'll be cool. But for the most part, I don't care. You know what I mean? So I probably will watch the game to watch Trubisky, to watch Cohen, but overall, it's not like I'm gonna live. Like I said, I'm not gonna sit on the edge of my seat and live and die with every play like I would a playoff game.
The Pro Bowl is the kind of thing that I feel like you could easily Twitter watch. You know what I mean? Like, it's like that kind of thing where, all the best moments I just know are going to be captured on social media anyway. Anything that's relevant, anything that's worth seeing in terms of photos, videos, or highlight plays. Like like to be tuned in for what the 3 or 4 hours that it actually takes place over the course that it actually takes place. Like, yeah, I just, I'll get the highlights and bits that I need, and then otherwise, like, oh hey, Tariq Cohen posing, oh hey, Tariq Cohen doing a cool touchdown dance, oh Akeem Hicks doing something, oh Trubisky being the first whatever, like that's gonna be someone's gonna curate that, and I'll see it. Maybe even me being the curator.
The only thing I think that I would, if I'm not gonna watch it, like if it comes to Sunday and I'm doing something different. The only thing I think that if I was not actually watching it to get me to turn it on would be I see on Twitter, oh, Trubisky's in the game now. I'll just flip it on real quick. Like that's the only thing I care about. Because I mean, the defense side, it's so unpredictable.
Yeah, exactly.
Obviously, like it's no one plays the whole game, and so Trubisky will probably get a couple drives. I think there's 3 other quarterbacks playing, so maybe each or maybe even more. But each quarterback gets a couple of drives or a quarter or whatever. But I think it'd be cool to watch him be in it. But it's not like, I mean, I love Mr. Trubisky as much as anybody, but it's not, I mean, he didn't strike me as like having a Pro Bowl season where if he hadn't made it, I would be devastated for him or consider him a snub at the same time. You know what I mean?
I think Matt Ryan should have got in, but that's a different story.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's a different story. And I think it's kind of like the MVP discussion where the Bears were a good team and the Falcons weren't. So even though Matt Ryan was probably a better quarterback than Mitch Trubisky this year, he doesn't get the nod because of team success. But even with that, I mean, don't get me wrong, Trubisky had a good year. There was a lot of growth, and it's cool that he got the nod. But I'm not positive he really deserved the nod because I don't think he was.
Well, he was a second alternate. He was a second alternate, man. So like, of course it's going to be subjective on that. Absolutely.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Anyway. More Bears news from today. The Bears get a scheduled away game in London next year, playing the Raiders. Rob, what do you think it says about the Bears' status in the NFL? I guess if you want to stay it to that extent, that they're being selected. I mean, obviously they had a scheduled road game against the Raiders anyway, and the Raiders had a scheduled international game. But does it say anything about the Bears that game was flexed to one that will be overseas, kind of the Bears being helping expose the NFL brand to the world, and it's going to be a national broadcast? Does it say anything about the Bears' status in the NFL?
I don't think so. I mean, the last time the Bears played in London was 2011, where they played the Buccaneers. It doesn't. I don't think it has anything to do with status. The NFL sends the friggin' Jaguars and other hosts of irrelevant teams to London every year. And sometimes an elite team, sometimes a contender just draws the short straws. It was the Bears' turn. They hadn't played in London in a while, and now they're going to do that. I don't think it says anything about their contender status. I think it's going to benefit the league for sure that one of the best teams will be going overseas for a game, and will allow a lot of Bears fans that are in England to be able to attend and watch. But I don't think it's a statement on anything or how far they've come necessarily. They just drew the short straw. They were up, and now it's time to take an 8-hour flight.
Do you have any? I know, obviously, we're talking overreaction Monday here. It's January 21st. This game isn't happening. The date isn't even set yet. It's not going to happen for at least 9 months. Do you have any concerns about the Bears having to play an overseas game?
No. You meaning losing that game? Or
well, I don't even mean losing. I just mean like in terms of their overall thing. I guess the reason I asked this, I actually did the semi-ridiculous research today and found that no team that has ever gone overseas during their regular season, has won the Super Bowl. Now, the first team to even make the Super Bowl after an overseas game was the Patriots of 2017, obviously making the Super Bowl 52 against the Eagles last year. And, but that's the Patriots. So that's kind of a different story. But no team that's ever gone overseas has won the Super Bowl, and only one team's ever made the Super Bowl. So I guess, again, we're talking big time, weird. I've gone way too deep into this. It's a big overreaction Monday. Does that give you any pause knowing all that?
No, because I mean they're going to get a bye week. They're going to get the rest. Like you just answered your own question. I think there's no correlation to that. They're going to have the rest. They got a relative softball. The Raiders are going to be terrible next year. I'm confident that they're not going to improve that much from the 2-14 record this season. They're going to get the complete rest. They're going to enjoy themselves. They're going to sell the game, and that's going to be that. I know the Patriots are the exception to what you just noted, but if you're a championship level team, if you're a team on a mission, if you're a team that's as talented as the Bears are on paper and as motivated as they'll be purported to be by next fall, one road game where you have the extra jet lag and stuff where you'll have time to get over it shouldn't derail that, and it won't. If the Bears ultimately don't end up winning the Super Bowl, it's not going to be because they travel to London. I think that's safe to say.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, that. I asked the question just kind of. I mean,
no, of course
we're desperate for stuff to talk about. It's January.
No,
21st.
we're not.
I shouldn't say desperate, but you know what I mean. Like we have. I guess we have to drum up something. And
I was going to say.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, it is interesting to me that the NFL scheduled the Bears and Raiders in London, and it's a Raiders home game. So Khalil Mack doesn't get to play in front of technically probably doesn't get to play in front of Raiders fans. I don't imagine there's that many Raiders fans in England.
Well, it doesn't sound like he would have gotten to play in Oakland anyway.
Well, he wouldn't have gotten to play in Oakland, but they were scheduled to still play in the Bay Area next year. So he was going to have that kind of pseudo return. And the NFL basically took that away. And now John Gruden and our company are going to get a pass rushing beatdown across the pond instead of in Mac's old stomping grounds. I found that interesting.
That's a good point. I wonder, this might be a little conspiracy theory-ish, but I wonder if the NFL is trying to avoid, maybe not avoid, but help mitigate whatever could have happened with that by making this game the overseas game.
I think, maybe in helping the Raiders. I don't think the NFL is actually too disappointed with that result because it made one of their market franchises relevant again.
I guess I mean more so helping the Raiders. I mean, obviously, the Raiders, I wouldn't say are a mainstay franchise, but obviously, you can't really undersell what Al Davis did for football. John Gruden's, pretty well respected. The Raiders are, one of the more well-known franchises, and obviously they traded the best player to come through their team in a long time. So just helping them avoid a little bit of a PR nightmare and have to see their fans watch the best player that they've had, in a while, and then they got rid of him. And it's just, I guess helping them avoid that a little bit.
Let me take the deep dive. So the Raiders are moving to Vegas, in 2019, 2020?
Next year, after this season. They moved 2020 is the year, right?
So, the NFL needs to sell the Raiders. They need to sell them in Vegas. They need them to have a positive image. They're very likely not going to by the time they go to Vegas, but people in Vegas might not care that much. So, then help the image of the best player you've drafted in over 2 decades. Don't give him that publicity or image of ripping you apart in his return or his return matchup against you. And let's take the deep dive even further. The NFL wanted to sell football in Los Angeles, so they didn't call the pass interference on nickel Robey-Coleman. I'm putting my tinfoil hat. Let's do it.
Wow. I like it. That's Overreaction Monday right there.
That is Overreaction Monday.
All right, next tiny bit of Bears news from today in terms of just, over assistant coach hires, not necessarily being the biggest headline stuff to come across, but obviously the Bears hiring Ted Monachino as their senior defensive assistant.
Sounds like a coffee.
What?
Sounds like a coffee.
It does sound like a coffee on Monachino. I'll take one Monachino, please. But the senior defensive assistant, which is a interesting little title there, and the outside linebackers coach after letting Brandon Staley it was Brandon Staley that was out.
Brandon Staley was the former outside linebackers coach.
I was gonna say I'm big time dropping the ball on this one. I knew Brandon Staley was a coach, but I couldn't remember if he was outside linebackers. Anyway, with that in mind, they also added a couple other coaches to the coaching staff on the defensive side of the football, with Deshae Townsend as the defensive backs coach, and a couple, I think a couple
quality control guys.
Quality control guys, yeah, which obviously a little lesser. But Rob, you're going to know a little bit more about these guys, especially Deshae Townsend and Monachino, than I do. But what can Bears fans expect a little bit from those two guys as assistants and what they might bring to the Bears defense.
Well, here's the thing with Monticino. His primary responsibility is going to be having coached Khalil Mack and Leonard Floyd. He has one of the easiest position coach jobs in football. It's going to be very hard for him to fail. Khalil Mack would excel with quite literally any position coach. If Monticino can somehow make him better, that is an incredible achievement in itself. I do think, though, that with Floyd, having said that Floyd is a good guy to watch out for, I do think a guy like Monticino can help coax out a little bit more out of him. So obviously, while Floyd came on extremely strong to finish the 2018 season, he has 15.5 sacks in 38 starts. He's 26, and he has a fifth-year option coming up, and the Bears are going to expect big things coming forward or moving forward from him. I think Monticino is the guy that can turn him into an 8 to 9 sack guy and have the Floyd have the production from the second half of 2018 over the course of an entire year and turn him into a vaunted top 10 pick like he was originally hyped up to be, and to be the perfect running back to Khalil Mack. Monticino has that kind of resume. Monticino is the guy that got one of the best stretches possible, or I think actually not possible, overall out of Terrell Suggs, one of the better defenders, one of the more underrated premier defenders of the past 12 years or so. I think, and I wrote about it today, the specific statistics, I think Suggs had 80 plus quarterback hits, or 88 quarterback hits, 79 tackles for loss, 48 or 48.5 sacks, and several other like forced fumbles and touchdowns and picks, and was a 2011 Defensive Player of the Year. And all of that was done under Monticino's guidance. So that should be a very exciting prospect for not only Mack, who again would be great no matter who his position coach is, but for Floyd, who I feel like has that one last step to truly take to truly become great. And this is the kind of coach that can perhaps unlock that. With Tashea Townsend, I don't know if his coaching resume really speaks to anything particularly impressive. He was a long time like quality starting corner, but he doesn't really have anything as a younger guy. It's still like 43. He only coached with the Titans. He's been in college. He's an assistant defensive backs coach with the Cardinals. He was with the Giants last year. I don't know if I'm necessarily impressed by anything he's done, but he's one of those risers. He's one of those guys that has been around several great defenders like Rod Woodson, like Bob Sanders with the Colts. He knows how to relate to guys, if that makes sense, especially from his playing days. Especially he's been on some great defense like the 2008 Steelers that won the Super Bowl, and I think it'll be very beneficial for what I would expect the Bears to eventually draft a young boundary corner to develop to eventually replace Prince Amukamara down the line. So I wouldn't necessarily be excited about any position coach hire, especially Townsend's, but there's a rhyme to that reason. If anything, I know a lot of people have wanted, Ed Reed, Hall of Fame safety, to come in. I think Townsend is kind of actually already filling that role. So that's my spiel on the defensive staff that matters so much.
Yeah. Obviously, I like that you bring up Ed Reed there. I think, people kind of brought that up because Ed Reed, expressed some interest in it and helped coach at the
He had one tweet about it. I don't know if it was
the tweet about it, and then he was also I think it was The Athletic maybe that did an interview with him about Coach Pagano and about Chuck Pagano. And he said that, he mentioned that he'd love to come, like in this interview, he mentioned he'd love to come here and work with Pagano and work with Eddie Jackson. I always thought, like, if, I don't think defensive backs coach was the spot he was going to get anyway. I could see him being like assistant defensive backs coach or like assistant safety coach. Like there's still, I mean, if the Bears had interest in doing that, I wouldn't be opposed to it, but I'm also not going to be pissed off if they don't do it. You know what I mean? It's one of those things. But you mentioned all of the success that Terrell Suggs had with Ted Monticino as his outside linebackers coach.
That was one of the most impressive, and I was looking at the statistical marks. Like, I don't know why Suggs wasn't getting more attention. That was dominant. That was like Watt and Mack and Miller type stuff, and he's not talked about in the same vein, and it makes no sense to me. But anyway,
Terrell Suggs is the product of Ball So Hard University.
Yes.
But with all that, and obviously Khalil Mack being an all-world talent, future Hall of Famer, say what we can go down all of the titles about Khalil Mack. Obviously, in the Defensive Player of the Year, can't talk every single year, but again, we're doing this Overaction Monday thing. Would you say it's Defensive Player of the Year or bust for Khalil Mack in 2019?
I mean, for the caliber of player that Mack is, it's Defensive Player of the Year or bust every year for him. It's a disappointment when he doesn't win the award because he's capable of winning it every year, especially as he sits in his prime at 27 years old. He's that good. There's no reason that he shouldn't be able to win it every season because he's just capable of taking over that consistently. The only thing that can derail him is injuries, and which it kind of did in 2018 is probably the main reason he probably won't capture it and have to relinquish it to Aaron Donald this year when he had that midseason stretch where he had a bum ankle after suffering it against the Dolphins. It's Defensive Player of the Year or bust every season for Khalil Mack, regardless of who his position coach is. I think it elevates the expectation, knowing what Montachino's done with a kind of similar player in the past, having worked with a similar, like, very, very gifted talent and very gifted, versatile talent like Suggs in comparison to Mack. But Mack is so good, I'd be disappointed if he's not lifting some kind of individual hardware, every early February. Yeah.
Okay. I kind of agree with that. I mean, I guess I think that's a good point about it being every single year. But then the other problem is, like, Khalil Mack had such a year that in a vacuum, you look at what he did this year, and it's you're like, oh wow, this guy could totally win Defensive Player of the Year. And then you just look at what Aaron Donald did, and you're like, oh wait, never mind. Like, how are you supposed to compete with that?
Mack's best argument is narrative, but narrative doesn't really drive in Defensive Player of the Year. Narrative more drives in things like MVP. Defensive Player of the Year has always been raw production. It's almost always a guy with the most amount of picks, most amount of sacks, especially in the analytics-driven era where it's more about the big plays and less about, like, accumulating 150 tackles like for inside linebackers like it used to be. So while Mack has the narrative, and I know Bears fans think he deserves it, and he arguably probably could deserve it. He could win it. He just doesn't have the same numbers that Donald does. I mean, you just mentioned it. Aaron Donald had what?
20 and a half sacks.
He almost broke the sack record. He was 2.5 sacks shy of the sack record, man. I mean, there's no way you could vote against that. Mack unquestionably, for anyone that paid attention to football in Chicago this year, he unquestionably had more of an impact on what the Bears season was. They're not a 12-4 team. They're not NFC North champions without him. But that's not enough for him to win an individual award. And here's the thing about Donald. Donald is arguably in the kind of situation. I know the Rams loaded up a little bit defensively this year. There's some good pieces, but he's arguably in kind of a similar position that Mack used to be in Oakland. I bet if you put a guy like Donald with the Bears around Eddie Jackson and Kyle Fuller and Prince Amukamara and Roquan Smith, I bet Donald could take his game to an even higher level. So that's the hole in that narrative Mack argument.
So what you just heard, folks, is Robert Zaglinski advocating for the Bears to trade for Aaron Donald.
I wouldn't be opposed to it. I'm not sure how they would get that done, having no first round picks for the next 2 years. But right. I wouldn't be opposed to it. Yeah.
Fair enough.
This is Madden now. Yeah,
let's just do it. Just load up. You know what I mean? Who cares?
Eddie Goldman, just paid Eddie Goldman a big extension. We don't need him.
Trade Eddie Goldman and a first-round pick for Aaron Donald. Fixed.
Is a run-stopping defensive tackle for the best pass-rushing 3-tech
Right.
Maybe ever. Yeah, that's totally fair.
Let's do it. Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's shift away a little bit. We were going to talk about this last week, but ran a little long. We had a really good discussion last week. But we got the Spider-Man Far From Home trailer dropped, and we're going to shift. If you ever listen to Rob and I do the Second City Hockey Ice Cold podcast, we always like to end with a little pop culture discussion.
Did anybody listen to those? I mean,
people did listen, man. I looked at the SoundCloud numbers. We got over 1,000 hits every time. I'm not kidding.
Oh, that's actually that's more than I expected. Anyway, sorry, go on.
Anyway, continue. Anyway, if you ever listen to those, we like to do pop culture references. So, Rob, here's our pop culture thing. We got the Far From Home trailer, which that's my new thing with movie trailers, at least for the big ones like that, like Endgame as well. I'm only watching the first trailer and never watching another one, so I'm not going to talk about more Spider-Man trailers. But wow, that trailer is freaking good. And the movie, I was a little disappointed with Homecoming. It wasn't my favorite, but Far From Home looks like it could be an absolute banger.
Yeah, I'm really intrigued. This was a conversation I was having with you and one of our other friends. I'm really intrigued with a Spider-Man story that isn't set in New York. Where you have him swinging around Venice, which I think we saw glimpses of as he's going down the river with MJ. And his other friend, I forget the other name of his friend is Ed. Is it just Ed? Okay, yeah. Ned. Or like Ned. Okay, it escapes me. And then obviously around London and Big Ben, like that's a whole new landscape. It makes it more Assassin's Creed because there's not really any like skyscrapers there. It's more parkour. It's more, like swinging around in short bursts. It's not the classic terrain that you'd be used to with Spider-Man. And I think that makes the action scenes that much more captivating to me. I mean, especially just based off of what we saw from the trailer. Not as much necessarily high flying. And I don't think we've ever Far From Home isn't based on any comics, is it? So I don't think we've actually ever gotten this story, which makes the whole thing really fresh.
Yeah, I don't think it's most outside of like Civil War, I think that most of the, outside of obviously the characters, none of the Marvel movies have really been like taking a comic story and just trying to put it on the screen. Civil War was kind of their first foray into that. And even then there was a lot of different differences they had to pull. Obviously, they didn't have all the same characters. They had to pick and choose some stuff, but they did a good job, kind of with the parallels. But yeah, it's a really good point about just it's not a comic story that we've seen before. And I like you said, I like the new aspect of it. And it makes it feel just like less predictable almost. Like, I don't need to see Spider-Man fight in Times Square again. I don't need to see Spider-Man on top of what's the really tall building in New York that I'm
Empire State.
Thank you, that one. I don't need to see Spider-Man around that.
Christ, Adam.
Dude, Chicago's better than New York, my friends. Yeah, I don't need to see that over and over again. Like, you know what I mean? Like Spider-Man. I don't want to say Spider-Man's story in New York has been told, but it was such a 2018 was such a Spider-Man flooded year with the Spider-Man game that came out, which was awesome,
which was incredible.
Right, a very, very good game. And then the Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse movie, which came out, which is in my opinion, I think you said this as well, the best Spider-Man movie to ever be made, and was easily probably one of my 3 favorite movies I saw in all of 2018. That it was such a big year that Far From Home has a little bit to live up to. And so the fact that they're going in a different direction.
How many movies did you see in 2018, Adam?
I saw a lot. I didn't enjoy a lot of the movies I saw in 2018 though. I thought Into the Spider-Verse was a really good movie. I really okay. I'm not I don't have high class pinky up champagne movie taste. I'm a pretty chill guy with movies, but I thought it was a really good movie top to bottom. This has been movies reviews with Adam. But anyway, there's a little bit of pressure still on Far From Home with kind of matching the Spider-Man hype and the Spider-Man delivery that we got from Sony in 2018 and going in this fresh direction with it. Obviously, they kind of knew they knew that this was going to be happening, that they had to kind of, I wouldn't say follow it, but I think that they knew that they basically had a game and a movie coming out before that. Plus, they have Endgame, and obviously Spider-Man having quote unquote died in Infinity War is going to play a big role in that. So there's going to be a lot of the Spider-Man drama, or the Spider-Man, like I said, almost flooding of like the superhero market, that Far From Home has to come out with something different to really stand apart. And like you said, going to Europe and making it different than just being in New York is a really good way to do that. And I am so freaking excited to see Mysterio on the big screen.
Yeah, it's the first like major film portrayal of him, right? Like,
which is almost a crime. Like it's a crime.
He's the
best. If not, like, in my opinion,
he's not the best Spider-Man villain.
I was gonna say, there's a lot of good Spider-Man villains. Spider-Man probably has Spider-Man probably has like 3 or 4 of the top 10 comic villains, including the DC universe. But Mysterio's up there. Like, I think he's one of the best villains.
You like him better than Doc Ock?
I don't like him better than Doc Ock. I think Spider-Man villains would go Doc Ock, Green Goblin, Mysterio.
I put Mysterio above Green Goblin. I think Green Goblin gets some really instances, but I don't think he's as compelling a villain. I don't think he's as fun or as interesting to me as Mysterio. I think Mysterio can be at times a little bit silly, but that's part of the appeal. And you know, he doesn't really have like a necessary superpower. He doesn't have like crazy strong robotic arms or genius intellect like Doc Ock, and he doesn't have the Green Goblin's enhanced physical abilities. He's just a dude that was an
actor.
An actor,
a wannabe actor, actually.
A wannabe actor that does tricks now to mess with Spider-Man, like, and somehow he gets away with so much, and I think that's really cool. I think the trailer made it seem like he actually had some kind of powers, which I'll be interested to see how they explain. Maybe some kind of projection thing, but yeah, I mean, to have him in a movie now, to have one of the best Spider-Man villains finally in a movie is really, really exciting. It almost, Mysterio's presence in that trailer, and this is something you pointed out to me, it almost makes me question a lot of how much of that trailer was actually real. Like, is Hydro Man real? Is Sandman real? Or were they just Mysterio illusions, and it's a temporary alliance only to get on Spider-Man's good side before he betrays him or something? You know what I mean?
There's so much there with Mysterio, so much potential for it. Like, Mysterio being involved really like helps it make sense why Nick Fury would get involved with a Spider-Man, like with a Peter Parker vacation, and take him away from that to be Spider-Man. And like you said, is Hydro Man real? Is Sandman real? Like, is it just Mysterio trying to make himself alliance with Spider-Man? Is it him trying to make himself look like a better hero than Spider-Man? Or is it like, is the Sinister Six going to be a thing? Like, there's so many routes they can go with it that I'm really intrigued to see what they do with it and how they make it. And I mean, Jake Gyllenhaal is not like the best actor in the world, but at least there's
a Family Guy skit that I love about him. But anyway, go on. Yeah,
right. At least he's like a recognizable face, and he's a talented actor, and it's fun. Like, it'll be fun to see how he kind of what he does with the character. I think is going to be really fun.
The only issue I have with Far From Home is that it's so like soon after Endgame, to where like that movie should be coming out like next holiday season.
Yeah,
and I remember like there were reports that Disney was actually pretty miffed by that, but since they don't have complete rights yet, they're not going to have complete rights for, I believe, a few years. Sony, you know, they don't care. They don't have any real investment in what Disney and Marvel are doing, so they need a big summer movie and they need a big hit, and they're going to release it in July. But to me, that, I don't know, that kind of takes a lot of the hit off of everything that this is. Like, for example, Nick Fury being involved altogether and trying to recruit Spider-Man, that makes, and not that this is a surprise or anything, because I fully expected it in Endgame, that makes me think that Tony Stark or Captain America is dead and he's looking for a new leader. He's trying to already start grooming to Spider-Man here. Like, it's so weirdly timed, and I'm sure Marvel didn't want it this way. I know Marvel didn't want it this way.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, and like you said, like I feel like even like almost feels like it shouldn't have even come in 2019, like with the way that Endgame is, and like how obviously Endgame is basically the end of phase 3 of the Marvel universe, and in some ways Endgame is kind of the end of what we know as the Marvel universe, depending on what happens, because from there Spider-Man, Far From Home basically begins, quote unquote phase 4, and they move forward from there, and it kind of moves into different directions. So like you said, is Tony Stark dead? Is Captain America dead? I mean, we already know that Chris Evans does not have a renewed contract after Endgame to keep playing Captain America. So does he die? Like this is something I actually thought watching the trailer. Like, is Nick Fury in Europe pulling Peter Parker away from what he's doing? Just trying to be Peter Parker for a moment to basically make him the new leader of the Avengers, because he's the young upstart and he's kind of the future of protecting Earth from the threats that are out there. Like there's so much there. I think that there's so much to be intrigued by that I as much as I say this, it almost scares me, because it's like I don't want to get too hyped up and then just be disappointed if they don't touch on all of it. You know what I mean?
Marvel makes these new Spider-Man movies, right? Like Marvel makes them. Like it's not like I say Sony's establishing them, but like I was under the impression that Marvel owned the rights to Spider-Man, that Marvel owned the complete rights, and that they could control this. Like,
no, it's kind of a weird thing. Like, so because I don't know the exact, like all the intricate details, but Fox owned Spider-Man, Marvel sold the rights to Spider-Man to Fox. Then Sony buys out Fox, so Sony gets the rights to Spider-Man. Disney buys Marvel, so basically you have Marvel unable to use Spider-Man, which is why it took up until Civil War in 2016 for us to even get a Spider-Man on the screen, because there was like I wouldn't say legal disputes necessarily, but I guess it was kind of a legal dispute where Marvel didn't have the rights to Spider-Man. Sony basically had to let them do it. And then as we have this like Spider-Man universe, or Spider-Man being involved in the Marvel universe, it's still Sony movies, and Sony is still doing a Spider-Man universe of their own, obviously starting with Venom. It's such a weird situation. And like I'm even looking, like I have the Wikipedia list up here of all the Marvel movies, and it says Sony Pictures scheduled the sequel to Spider-Man Homecoming. So basically, I guess Sony has the rights to the scheduling, and that kind of lends to what you said, where Marvel didn't necessarily want it the way that the schedule is.
When do they get the full rights back to everything? Do you know?
I'm actually not sure. I'll just bad radio real quick. I'll see if I can find it.
I'm Googling it now, and it says early 2019, which would be coincide with January now, and it doesn't make sense to me.
Let's see here.
Like that's not.
I'm gonna find it here. I promise you.
Because they should have. They should have it back, and like they have X-Men and they have everything, and like they're still getting screwed over by going bankrupt all these years ago, which is on them, but you know what I mean.
I'm gonna find this, I promise you.
This is fantastic podcast.
Really good radio here. We're searching Sony Pictures on the Spider-Man in film. What's what I'm looking for? Wikipedia page. There's 21 instances of this. Oh god, I'm in the references now. I don't know. Let's see. It says rights were secured by Sony for $10 million. Wow, that's not a whole lot. Back in 2001.
Well, yeah, Marvel wasn't worth that much back then, man.
That's true. I don't know. I can't find it. Shit. I don't know. I don't know when that ends.
That's problematic.
Bad radio. Sorry.
Very bad radio. Anyway,
let's wrap this up.
let's wrap this up. Spider-Man Far From Home is going to be awesome, because everything has to be compared now. No one can ever enjoy anything. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse will probably still be a better movie. Anyway, yes.
All right, Rob. Well, thanks for joining me. Hopefully next week we'll know when Spider-Man no longer is of ownership of Sony.
That's gonna lead our topics.
By then, yeah, we'll just start with that.
So there'll be a Super Bowl preview to get to. There'll
Right.
be a Pro Bowl review, maybe other full position coaches. We got to talk to Spider-Man, dude. That's gonna lead.
By then, it will not be topical anymore, and it will definitely not be timely. But we have to make up for the 45 seconds of bad radio I just gave our listeners. Anyway, for Robert Zuglinski, who you can follow, he is our editor-in-chief here at the Blitz Network. You can follow him on Twitter at Robert Zuglinski. That's spelled Z-E-G Linsky with an I. You can follow me. I'm the lead multimedia producer. My name's Adam Hess. Follow me at _Adam Hess. Follow the Blitz Network at the BlitzNet. And follow all of our stuff at patreon.com/the Blitz Network. Follow all of our great writers. We have some good stuff coming up here for the off season. Rob, do you have a parting shot?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously it's the off season. It's a little bit of the dead period. I understand for a lot of people, especially considering that the Bears don't have their first 2 draft picks and they don't have a ton of cap space. But there's still some finagling. There's still some creativity they can work with. There's still some history pieces we can look back on. There's still some film reviews we can work with. There's a lot of really fun and interesting stuff we have on the docket, especially with a lot of the writers we've gathered, like you mentioned, that, I fully encourage people, and maybe I'm a little biased, to cop on with us, give us a shot. It's obviously not the same level of content as the regular season as describing games, but in my opinion, this second part of the year where we're breaking down prospects and we're breaking down free agency things and we're getting into interviews and such is just as fascinating, just as interesting, and just as worthy enough to subscribe and be one of our very, very loyal patrons that help us out. So just as our little plug there.
Here's my parting shot. I found the answer. We don't need to leave with it next week. Sony just owns the rights to Spider-Man. So it never ends. Yeah, it never ends. They'd have to sell it.
Oh, God.
There's no contract.
So they do like the sharing thing where like
basically,
he can be a part of the Avengers.
They're basically like leasing Spider-Man to the Marvel universe so that they have a hero to use. But Marvel doesn't even get any money from the box office from what I'm seeing here. So Marvel's kind of getting the short end of the stick here.
They don't own their most popular character. That must be so emasculating.
I wonder like how it works with like Endgame and Infinity War, where like Spider-Man's involved, obviously, but it's not a Sony movie. Like that's a Marvel movie.
They're not going to give them. They might give them like 5% of the proceeds or something like that.
I'm sure there's something on the internet there, but I don't want more bad radio. Anyway, that's Rob. I'm Adam. Thanks so much for listening. We will talk to you next week for a Super Bowl preview, and we'll see what other Bears news there is to cover at the time. And thanks again for listening. And as always, stay classy, everybody.